Thanks again for tuning in to the Journey to Trust podcast. I'm actually grateful for all the support that I've been receiving. Today's episode is entitled Where is the Log? And this is part 2. In episode 2, I did Where is the Log? And I basically shared a story of how I felt and how I reacted from some posts that I was seeing online, and how God really pegged me with scripture and basically told me that I was the person with the log in my eye. And so as I reflected and I wrote down some things which I'm about to share, I really wanted to be precise with my sharing. And so let me just get right into it. In the heat of racial tension, I have felt the quell of judgment bursting forth. Judgment toward the police officer for the heinous act of murder. And I was bewildered by the hate someone could have in their heart to stay on someone's neck as they cry for their mother. I felt grieved that human life, someone made in God's image, could be treated this way. I felt judgment toward those who were insensitive to the plight of Black people and trying to rationalize pain that was not theirs with the All Lives Matter response. I felt judgment toward the leftist agenda, which is, as usual, hijacking the racial tension to score political points and incentivize division. And then I felt aggravated by the right's response, demanding that Black Lives Matter protest this way and that, and minimize the reality of systematic oppression, and sensitively claiming that it's a myth, that police brutality is a myth, racism is a myth, because they have some statistics that they can quote. And then as the riots progressed, I felt the same grievous emotion toward the constant barrage of violence and division that I was seeing. I felt a familiar tearing at my soul that I haven't felt in quite a while, and I could not pinpoint exactly where it was coming from. So I had to do an exercise that I've learned that has been tremendously helpful for me. I slowed down to listen to my body and what it was trying to tell me. As Peter Scazzaro, author of Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, says, the body is a major prophet, it's not a minor prophet. And what I was feeling in my body was I felt torn in half. And I know about this feeling very, very well. The first time my parents split was when I was 6. The damage there was so formative and shaping on so many levels. I actually wouldn't know how deep that damage was until I was 26 and I did my first inventory. They got back together a few years later, and then they very dramatically split up again when I was 11, and that was on New Year's night in 1999. I witnessed my dad, my hero, being lambasted with a barrage of slaps and punches, defending his face as my mom aggressively attacked him. I did not know what started the fight. I just saw the aftermath. My dad, fed up with the attack, aggressively restrained my mom and screamed at her to stop. Then finally, they heard my crying and my pleading, and then they directed their attention to me, trying to lobby for support. My mom saying, did you see the way he hit me? My dad saying, did you see the way she hit me? And I replied from what I saw. I saw my mom attack my dad, and then my dad stopped the attack. My mom, in frustration, stomped away in a fury, called the cops, and then I saw my hero scurry away with a few trash bags of his belongings. And since that point, I've been in the middle of a feud between the two. I've been tugged in one direction or another, and eventually receiving frustration from both of them because I wouldn't side with either of them completely. To bring it back, I have my white family who have their thoughts on these matters, and they're supportive of protests and the fight against systematic racism. I also have my white friends who won't associate with the Black Lives Matter hashtag because of the way the Black Lives Matter movement has moralized on politics and politicized morality. I have my Black family who feel the sense of injustice, and they've been vocal about it long before the travesty of Ahmaud Arbery. And I have my Black family who says that the violence is actually justified, and there's a double standard in American history for how riots are viewed. I have my Latino family. Part of them say that the violence is flat out justified, and some even justify the killing. And then I have my Latino family who doesn't agree with that at all. So to give you some extra context, as a Latino male growing up in the Bronx, I've been considered too light skinned by blacks to fully be a part of their crowd. And then going to Lehman High School, very large school and kind of a melting pot, I saw organic segregation, and I found myself friends with the misfits of the school. I grew up in a Christian camp, and I was always asked if I was black, and some people thought and considered me black without even confirming. And then I have my black brothers who stood by my side as I got married, and I don't think twice about their skin pigmentation. I grew up hearing some outlandish things, some outlandish racist things from my own family. I recognized that my body was trying to speak something more transcendent and pertinent to my personal narrative. I felt estranged and marginalized into mediocrity on so many levels. My codependency has flared up tremendously because I don't feel like I have space to have my own outlook without being sucked into the polarization of our culture. When I started my Step 4 inventory, I was in a very damaged mindset, and that was in 2016. I became an expert in pain avoidance. That's what I learned. I felt trapped between my ministry ambitions and addiction to porn. In my mind, the two could never coexist, or so I thought, because God is using my weakness as my strength, and He's showing me that they can coexist, which is crazy. So as I peel back the layers with my sponsor, I saw that the physical and emotional abandonment that I experienced, it warped my character to consistently assume the worst of every situation. The split also left me taking the position of whoever I was closest with in proximity. So if I was with my mom, I tried to agree with her as much as I can. And if I was with my dad, I tried to agree with him as much as I could. Self-sabotage and self-fulfilling prophecies were a regular pattern in my life because I would expect the worst to happen. I had big problems with rejection-based thinking, and I still do. These pervasive issues are self-inflicting, and I can never bring myself to really trust anyone. And the more relational breaks I experience, the more emotionally distant I become, only numbing more and living by the drumbeat of compulsion and people-pleasing. I grew to absorb the predominant thought process around me because I've been hardwired to believe that agreeing is friendship and love. So all the division and chaos I've experienced on social media has definitely triggered me to show me that those issues God revealed in my first inventory, those issues in my character are still there. Trying to find peace in any external or temporary fixture is like the epitome of a codependent response. I recognize I've been trying to agree with the predominant narrative in big ways. I did this before when I first heard the Black Lives Matter hashtag, and I actually sided with those who I was in closest proximity with, stating that all lives matter. I, as a 31-year-old adult, have still been emotionally responding to things as an adolescent at best. I have perspectives and thoughts that would frustrate both sides, if I'm honest, because I might get misunderstood. I did post some of those things, which is a victory in my book. I'm trying to be less codependent. One of the hardest things to hear when I worked through my first inventory with my sponsor was that I needed to look in the mirror and take responsibility for my bitterness and my anger towards my mom and my dad and forgive them. I didn't want to. I felt justified in my anger and my bitterness, but I knew I had to. In fact, in my efforts to make amends with my dad the first time, I was actually severely disappointed because I expected him to reciprocate my amends, and he did not. God is still working on my heart to forgive him, even if he never comes around to understanding. So even now, I'm feeling God free me to be courageous and speak my perspective, ask questions that trouble me, not get sucked into the loudest narrative and just listen and accept that I can see truth in those that I don't agree with. God is showing me that I have the space to be myself when and only if I truly have my stamp of approval and how he sees me. I don't have to prove to my white friends that I'm not a communist for siding with the Black Lives Matter hashtag. I don't have to prove to my black family that I'm not a white supremacist and a racist empathizer for not agreeing with looting and senseless violence. I have recognized a transformation in my life began and it still begins to take place when I see the character defects God revealed and reveals to me, and I take ownership of those character defects and work on my side of the street. I have zero control to fix the chaos around me, but I can take action to allow God to transform the chaos within me. I realize the divisive nature of our current situation brought back all of those feelings of abandonment, rejection, feelings of displacement, and codependent thoughts, and that came from my formative years of my trauma. And I'm so prone to slipping into fear and despair of our current context, and I grow forgetful of where my hope rests. And I was losing sight that I have no control over the political landscape, no control over the racist hearts and systems that still exist, no control over people's views of what kind of life matters to whom. And God revealed to me there will always be marginalized and oppressed people. And until Jesus comes back, or until I die, I am called to stand in the gap with them. So ultimately what matters most is my intimacy with God. And I talked about that in the last episode. The gateway to intimacy with God and others is realizing that I'm not in control, that I'm not God, and that my life is unmanageable. And for the first time in a while, it wasn't my addiction that brought me to the deeper revelation of my spiritual poverty. It was my arrogant disposition that assumes that my thoughts, my tweets, my Facebook and Instagram posts can actually make things right. George Floyd's death shook me to my core. So much so that I immediately messaged my black family in grief and beside myself, because I can't imagine the fear that they have to live with on a daily basis. And doing this for me was actually a healthy step, because I felt what I was feeling in the moment, and then I responded to that feeling, and I believe God put in my heart. And I didn't think twice about how I was going to be received. For the first time in matters of race, I understood how I can empathize, and I actually used the hashtag Black Lives Matter because I meant it. Back when I used the All Lives Matter ideology, I was so hell-bent on thinking the right thoughts, I did not have the capacity to love what Christ loved and truly enter into the pain of another. I think being aware of my own pain and feelings of disenfranchisement created space in my soul to feel deeper levels of empathy. So Matthew 7:1-5 says this: "Judge not, that you be not judged. For with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged, and with the measure you use it, it will be measured to you. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' when there is a log in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye." I'm not at the speck yet. I'm still working on my log. I'm fighting to not let the incessant barrage of chaos around me take me away from my time to just be still and know that He is God. I'm trying to maintain the courage to embrace the process, especially when I don't like it, and trust my beautiful Jesus one step more than I did yesterday. Thank you for letting me share.